Well, I was sort of planning to go out on a picnic today.
Yeah, we could do that.
But the weather's turned back to winter again, which it does. Just wait 10 minutes, it'll become something else.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't think it's going to make it back to picnic weather anytime today. So anyway, I thought since we can't go for a picnic, instead we'd go searching for Salt Lake's missing trolley system.
Oh, how fun.
Because Salt Lake at one time had one of the world's best trolley systems.
That's amazing.
Some have said the best trolley system in America.
Wow.
Certainly the best one west of the Mississippi.
Yeah, I just have a hard time to believe that.
Yeah, because there's nothing here now. There's a new light rail system, but that's a whole new system. So it's amazing. So we're going to go see what we can find.
Nice.
It seems every major city had some kind of rail mass transit system, trolley system, elevated railway, subway, whatever. And Salt Lake City was certainly no exception, but a lot of people don't know that it had a very, very significant trolley system. It was first built in 1872 as a horse-drawn trolley system. It was only about 1.5 miles long. It connected the Utah Central Depot to the downtown area. The Utah Central Depot stood right where the UP Depot currently does, and that was the connection up to the Transcontinental Railroad in Ogden. It was so darn successful that several other lines were immediately built by other people to connect some of the Salt Lake City locations. This is car number 15, and even after all the other cars were destroyed, this one was preserved. And Karen and I found it in a museum up at the State Capitol building in Salt Lake City. It's not in really great shape, but keep in mind this thing's almost 150 years old. And boy, is it cool! It's in the Pioneer Memorial Museum right across the street from the State Capitol building, which is the home of the Daughters of Utah Pioneers. And they've got this whole massive collection of really cool things in here, including this incredible steam fire wagon, an original Salt Lake fire engine. It's amazingly cool and perfectly restored. Check that out. Well, back to number 15 here. It's an amazingly cool trolley. It's double-ended, so you didn't have to turn it around. And look at this. It's got some metal tabs welded to the wheels, and those are wrapped with rawhide. What the heck is that? Well, as this was their preserved unit, they wanted to be able to haul it up the middle of the street, not necessarily on tracks, and use it in parades and other events and that sort of thing. And so the rawhide was designed to protect the wheels and the street from the flanges. While the paint job is very much based on the original paint job, it is a more modern recreation for special events. It doesn't look like it was a terribly comfortable thing to ride around in, but it sure beats walking, doesn't it? It's sure great to see an example of early trolley construction like this. This is the logo of the Salt Lake City lines. Like I say, it's a more modern paint job. Well, these systems were incredibly profitable and popular, and all 5 companies were competing with each other and even laying parallel track. Some streets had 4 tracks in them. In 1897, electricity became available in Salt Lake City, and the streetcar lines started to convert to electric operation. The electric cars were a huge hit, and they were always packed with people. On holidays like the 4th of July, you might have to wait an hour to get on one of the things. Having 5 competing companies, though, did create a problem, and so in 1901, 4 of the companies were merged, and the 5th one just kind of went out of business. The new company was called Consolidated Railway and Power Company. The competing trackage was all torn up, and a much more logical system was devised, and lines were extended even further out into the rural areas. The Sugar House line was particularly popular because a lot of heads of households were in the prison there for being polygamous. The community became totally dependent on the trolleys. They were pretty much driving the whole economy, and when a strike was called, it became a major protest. The trolleys were amazingly busy whenever there was a parade, and back then there were a lot of parades. This is the GAR parade, the Grand Army of the Republic. These were the surviving Civil War veterans who had an annual parade. While it no longer holds this distinction, Salt Lake City was the second largest city in the West. This is the annual spring floral parade. They'd put flowers on the trolleys, and that would be the parade. How fun is that? With the growing needs of the community for electricity, and with the expansion of the trolley system, pretty soon Salt Lake City streets were just a maze of utility poles and wires. And because the trolleys ran right up the middle of the street, so did many of the utility poles. The streets were also packed with horses, carriages, and people walking out to get into the trolleys. And so the streets were just a massive clutter of activity. It was unsafe and unattractive. In 1907, the system went through a major renovation. All of the power utilities were merged, all the electrical wires buried, and state-of-the-art trolley poles replaced the old wooden poles, all of the new poles running at the sides of the street. The money behind this expansion was E.H. Harriman, president of the Union Pacific, who was making the trolley system a part of Union Pacific. A lot of the investors were furious, saying, "Why are we buying a trolley company?" Harriman said he wanted to electrify the Union Pacific, and this was to be his test bed. It was well known that there were some connections between the Union Pacific Railroad and the Mormon Church, and many people assumed that there was some kind of double super secret deal in place for the Union Pacific to build this trolley system. Harriman made an absolutely eloquent argument saying that building infrastructure is always the right thing to do. It builds community, it builds economy, and he said, "Let the good work go forward." And that pretty much shut up all of the critics. But the net effect in all of this was fabulous. The new Salt Lake City was positively amazing. The massively wide streets could now be seen as the boulevards that they truly were. The spider web of overhead wires was amazingly unobtrusive, and the city felt spacious. But it seems that space will always get filled, in this case by the automobile, and the ever-growing population of Salt Lake City. The expansion included lines out into the more suburban areas, and connected to an interurban system that stretched from Idaho to central Utah. A location was found to build all new car barns. Here again, the new car barns were to be state-of-the-art, and they had to be huge. Expectations were that they may need to put 100 cars a day out on the tracks. The new car barns were in Utah tradition brick, but with a mission design. This was the sand house. Sand is just as important in trolleys as it is in steam locomotives for traction. This was the repair-in-place facility and machine shop. The facility was to have a complete back shop. The shops were connected and served by a transfer table. With double-ended cars, there was of course no need for a turntable, and so a transfer table worked just fine. A large water tank was installed. It provided water to the fire abatement system. 50 new cars were ordered to augment the existing cars, and all of them could be stored inside these double-ended barns. Harriman had also consolidated all of the various electrical utilities around the valley. Most of these were hydroelectric, capitalizing on the water coming down the canyons. They not only supplied power for the trolleys, but for the community as well. For years after this construction, managers from traction companies all over the country came to Salt Lake to tour the facilities. And just as in the past, the trolley system was used to provide floats for the various parades. The biggest of these being the Pioneer Days parade on the 24th of July every year. There was a time when everyone in America loved a parade, and certainly that was true in Salt Lake City as well. By the early 1940s, the automobile had done a pretty thorough job of destroying the viability of the trolley systems. But in Salt Lake City, they came up with a rather attractive alternative, the trolley bus. These would not run on tracks, but could still utilize the overhead wires for power. These rapidly spread to other cities, but for some reason they just never really caught on in Salt Lake. A few of the old trolleys were repurposed. This is Ruth's Diner, built of an old trolley. Ruth was something of a legendary fixture in Salt Lake City. She moved her diner up into the mountains later on. It's still in business up there and is one of the hip places to eat in Salt Lake City. Karen and I love driving up the canyon and grabbing a meal here. Another surviving artifact is the Southeast Substation on Highland Drive in Sugar House. These substations took the line voltage from the hydroelectric plants, in this case 22,000 volts AC, and converted it into direct current to be used on the trolley wires. Like the rest of the system, these substations were state-of-the-art in their day. But it's the car barns that are the amazing surviving facility. In 1970, Wally Wright, a real estate developer, purchased the car barns and started redeveloping them into something of a mall. His inspiration was Ghirardelli Square in San Francisco. He dubbed the place Trolley Square and filled the place with as many surviving trolleys as he could lay hands on, as well as a lot of other antiques from around town. This is Salt Lake's Orpheum Theater. It was later renamed the Capitol Theater, but it always had this huge arched sign over the street. Well, the city ordered it torn down, so Wally bought it and brought it to Trolley Square. And it's still there, one of the few surviving artifacts that Wally put in here. Wally also utilized some architectural elements that he salvaged from some old mansions that were being torn down. One of the most impressive things he was able to get was the stained glass ceiling out of the Paris Millinery Company. The Paris had this huge domed skylight that provided light to this giant stained glass ceiling. Wally purchased that when they tore the building down and brought it here to Trolley Square and put it in the atrium outside the old spaghetti factory. Trolley Square became one of Salt Lake's favorite fun spots. Karen and I finished off our fun trolley day by having dinner at Trolley Square. The place has evolved quite a bit since the 1970s, but it's still a very popular place to go in Salt Lake City. Inside, they've opened up the space quite a bit by tearing out some of the floors. Most of Wally's original antiques have been removed. The architectural elements have all been replaced by modern construction, possibly done for safety reasons, who knows. The old street lights that Wally put in here to light the place are still here, but pretty much all the other antiques have all been removed. While it's a lot more 21st century than it used to be, it's still very much an old car barn, and it still has its unique character. Back then, they constructed this fun little HO layout to show what the car barns were like when they were being used as a trolley barn. It's a pretty accurate recreation of the way the car barns used to be. Unfortunately, the trolleys don't work anymore, but it's still a really fun model to check out. The car barns themselves are, of course, completely scratch-built and pretty well done. Be fun if they could get at least one of these trolleys working again. Just this year, they built a fun little museum up on the second level. The Trolley Square Museum goes into the whole history of the trolley network and the construction of these car barns. In fact, there's a bit of renovation going on through a lot of Trolley Square. We came to have dinner in the old spaghetti factory. The old spaghetti factory is the only space inside Trolley Square that looks exactly like it did back in the 70s when it opened. The old spaghetti factory is based out of Portland, Oregon, but their aesthetic was exactly in keeping with Wally Wright's aesthetic for Trolley Square, so it was a really good fit. In fact, all of the spaghetti factories have an old trolley in them for diners to eat in. You having fun?
Oh, yeah.
Coming to the spaghetti factory is something like time traveling back to the early 1970s when Trolley Square opened. Still has all the old architectural elements. Not one thing has really changed inside here. Well, that was a lot to take in.
I was.
Good grief. What a shame there aren't more trolleys. So little of that has survived to say it was such a big thing.
To attest it was there.
Yeah, I mean, Trolley Square's there. The old horse-drawn trolley is there in the museum, but you just, other than...
To the newcomer coming to Utah, I think it's just a theme park.
Yeah, there's this little light rail system that's all brand new and everything, but nobody would know that this was once the home of one of the most elaborate trolley systems ever built.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's just incredible.
Right.
Just incredible. Also, that when they were putting in the new track and everything, the Union Pacific, did you notice that hanging in the middle of the intersection at 2nd South and Main was a traffic semaphore?
Isn't that something?
And that's the second one to go in that intersection. The first one looked like a bird cage. It was invented by a Salt Lake cop who would have to stand down there and direct traffic, and he came up with this idea, and he took a locomotive headlight, added some lenses out of a switch lantern, hooked it up to electricity, and then the trick was just teaching the cars to stop on red and go on green. Which kind of everybody already knew because the trolleys already did that and trains did that, and so it was just a matter of making sure that people knew to do that too. And sure enough, he accidentally, or kind of on purpose really, invented the traffic light.
Well, see, they were automating jobs even back then.
Absolutely.
There's a little machine taking...
This guy put himself out of work, though. Oh. And the really stupid thing, not only did he put himself out of work, he didn't even bother to patent his invention.
Uh-oh.
So Kraus-Heinz comes along and goes, that's a pretty darn good idea. And they do patent it and make all this money, and he never got a dime out of the deal.
Geez.
He actually ended up turning the traffic light, which everybody referred to as the birdhouse, into a birdhouse. Because everybody kept saying it was one, so might as well use it for one. So
little red and green birdies flying out of it.
That's kind of weird. And then there was that shot of the trolley going through Eagle Gate.
Yeah.
And that was kind of neat. And we accidentally found the eagle from the original Eagle Gate.
Didn't know it was there.
And there it is in the Daughters of Utah Pioneers Museum,
cool.
the original hand-carved wooden eagle that was on the original gate. The one that's up there now is, of course, like the whole gate, which is now, 80 feet wide or 120 feet wide. Or no. And it's huge. It's like,
big.
Good grief. I wonder if you threw that thing, if it would fly.
Oh, it could.
And that's a neat museum.
Oh, we've got to go back.
What amazing stuff in there, but there was the eagle.
Take an entire day because I think it's going to take that long just to go through it.
Oh, gee.
Or 2 days or something.
I imagine it will. And the trolley bus.
Oh.
You know, what a great idea. It's like they've got this huge trolley system and they don't want to run it as a trolley system anymore. So they build electric buses that'll run from the same trolley wire, and they put that whole thing together and it never catches on. And it was only around for a few years, and then they replaced it all with diesel buses.
What's up with that? They use them in other cities.
Every other city spotted what they had done there and went, that's a pretty good idea.
Right,
so San Francisco replaced a lot of their trolleys with trolley buses, and it swept across the whole country. It's sort of like poor Lester Wire with his street light. It was an idea that took off, just not here.
There's a lot of those ideas.
So they came up with this great idea to build electric buses and rolled it out here in Salt Lake. Within a few years, it was everywhere else, just not here. So
that's what happens when you roll something out.
That's the way of things, I guess. I don't know, but kind of sad when you think about it. Kind of sad.
Yeah, make sure you have your one-man band when you roll something out.
And then Wally Wright, the guy that built Trolley Square, I think some people know it and some people don't. But after he got Trolley Square up and running, he came up with the really crazy idea to rebuild the old Salt Air Resort out on the Great Salt Lake.
Okay.
And so he bought an aircraft hangar because, he built everything out of old used stuff. That was his stock and trade.
That's what
So he moved an airplane hangar out there and turned it into the new Salt Air. And unfortunately, the year he opened it to the public, he also opened it to the lake.
Oh.
Because the lake rose 20 feet.
Well, yeah.
And the ballroom was now a swimming pool instead of a ballroom.
Have they kept track of how many salt airs have come and gone?
3 for sure.
Oh.
3 for sure.
Because there's been quite a few.
And it's open again. They pumped it out. Well, they drained the lake. They waited for the lake to go down. They attempted to drain it, but how do you drain a lake? But anyway, it just naturally went back down. They cleaned up the mess, and they're doing concerts out there. But Wally Wright's not involved because the whole project went bust when it flooded.
Oh, gee.
Sort of sad. Sort of sad. Well, anyway, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop over to the channel. And if you haven't subscribed, do subscribe, because subscription is cool because you get notified when we put up cool stuff, which is Fridays for car stuff and Sunday for all kinds of other cool stuff.
Right.
Sometimes car stuff too. You just never know what we're going to do. Whatever screwing around we find to go do, we just go do.
That's right.
Anyway, do subscribe, and you can subscribe by clicking on the blue button that's about to appear. You ready? Zoing! Right there, blue button, it says subscribe. Literally means what it says, which these days is rare.
It's not fake.
Very few people mean what they say anymore. Blue button does. Click on it, you're a subscriber. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring, and we will see you here again next week with some more screwing around. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.